Long ago, in the sun-kissed kingdom of Zaraya, food was more than nourishment, it was legacy, honor, and power. The wise King Omari was growing old, and the people urged him to choose a wife, not just a queen, but a woman with fire in her spirit and flavor in her hands. Let the stomach choose what the eyes cannot, whispered the elders. And so, the king declared, let there be a contest of fire and flavor. Whichever woman moves my heart through her dish, shall sit beside me on the throne. 2 women stepped forward. The whole kingdom gasped. Malaika, the sunfire cook. Malaika was known for her wild, joyful energy. Her laugh could stir a pot, and her spices could make even old warriors dance. She cooked like the wind, free, bold, unpredictable. She came from the river tribes, where fish danced in every pot, and mangoes were picked with songs. Nia, the quiet flame. Nia was serene and wise, her every movement as graceful as the moonlight. She cooked with precision, patience, and love passed down from grandmothers who whispered recipes like prayers. She was the daughter of desert traders, her meals rich with ancient spices and secret blends only the stars remembered. The contest was set for 3 days. They would cook before the royal court, a dish from their roots, a dish of invention, and a final feast worthy of a queen. The contest was set for 3 days. They would cook before the royal court, a dish from their roots, a dish of invention, and a final feast worthy of a queen. On the morning of the first day, the sun rose over the hills of Zaraya with the sound of drums and the scent of fresh herbs drifting through the air. The kingdom had never seen such anticipation, as people from all corners gathered to witness not just a contest, but a moment that would shape their future queen. Malaika arrived at the palace courtyard with a stride as fierce as fire. Her dress fluttered like flames, dyed in the orange of marula and the red of hibiscus. She was surrounded by a small group of dancers who hummed her tribal songs as she set up her ingredients. Her river spices, still fresh from morning markets, shimmered under the sun. Across from her, Nia stepped silently onto the stone tiles, dressed in soft earth tones, her face calm as a resting lake. She knelt gracefully before her ingredients, bowls of preserved dates, dried okra, finely ground desert cinnamon, and the heirloom grains passed down from her grandmother. The royal court watched from high seats shaded in royal cloth. King Omari sat between 2 great elephant tusks, carved with the stories of past rulers. His eyes were curious, alert not for beauty or charm, but for depth. As the gongs struck, the 2 women began. Malaika's kitchen roared with energy. Flames rose and laughter echoed as she crushed ginger with her bare hands, sprinkled chili like thunder, and sang between stirrings of her passionfruit glaze. Her fish cooked with the intensity of love, hot, fast, daring. When the dish was plated, it looked like a painting, golden tilapia dressed in red-orange sauce, circled by yam fritters dusted with lemon ash. The crowd clapped before tasting. Nia moved like breath itself. She touched every grain with care, measured with intuition rather than haste. She mixed lamb with soft desert figs and laid down crushed peanuts with the steadiness of a sculptor. Her dish emerged not with shouts, but with a quiet gasp from the court, a delicate balance of color and aroma, a stew that smelled like memory and mystery. When the king tasted them, he made no face. He simply nodded, and the crowd fell into silence. That night, stories of the first round spread like wildfire. The village drums danced in Malaika's name, but elders whispered of Nia's silence that spoke volumes. The second day rose cooler, with the wind carrying tension instead of song. This was the day of invention where no ancestors could help, only imagination. Malaika lit her fire before dawn, already dancing around pots, tossing in pineapple with goat ribs, wrapping it all in banana leaves like gifts for the gods. Her sauce, thick with tamarind and wild honey, sizzled with rebellion. The scent of her food caused children to sneak near the judge's table, licking the air like honeybees. Nia stayed alone under the baobab tree for an hour before cooking. She listened to birds. She listened to herself. Then she walked calmly to her table and began something strange: no meat, no stew. She sliced fresh coconut into thin sheets, kneaded flour from cassava, and stirred a chilled mix of baobab fruit, lime, and sorghum milk. She shaped her dessert into a delicate stack, poured hibiscus syrup like rain, and crowned it with golden sugar crystals made under the sun. The palace went still after tasting. Even the spoons rested quietly on the plates, as if full. Malaika smiled fiercely. Nia bowed. The king did not speak, but his smile flickered once as he looked at the moonlight reflecting in the syrup. By the third day, the kingdom had split into two silent armies, those of fire and those of moon. The queen's feast would decide everything. People camped overnight to witness it, priests blessed the stoves, and the king's own plate was polished in goat milk and bronze ash. Malaika arrived like a storm. She had painted her face with sun charcoal and wore a necklace of dried chili pods. Her final dish was a war cry: cinnamon beef wrapped in cassava rolls, fried plantain hearts, riverside greens, and a sauce she called the thunder of love. It was loud, smoky, seductive, bursting with strength. But when Nia stepped up, even Malaika paused. Nia was dressed in mourning white, a symbol of both peace and power. Her dish came in a simple bowl wrapped in banana bark, steam rising like incense. Inside, lentils sang with tamarind, okra melted into moringa, and one single white flower floated on top a desert bloom her mother once used to soothe fevers. The king tasted Malaika's feast with his eyes closed. He breathed once, twice. Then he turned to Nia's bowl and tasted that too. He lingered. He said nothing. Then, he stood. The court held its breath. So did the cooks. He turned to Malaika. "Your fire makes the tongue dance," he said. "Your food is fearless, and your spirit is wild." Then to Nia. "Your calm stirs the soul. Your food remembers us. It tastes like truth." And then his voice changed. "But I am not a king of either fire or calm. I am king of all. What I seek is not just heat or depth, it is balance." He looked to the sky, where the sun and moon now shared the horizon. "Let there be two queens. One of flame, one of moonlight. You shall rule beside me together, not as rivals, but as roots and rain." And so Malaika and Nia were crowned, not because one had beaten the other, but because each revealed the soul of the kingdom. Together, they turned the palace into a haven of peace and flavor. Malaika taught joy, Nia taught patience. Their food brought enemies to the table and strangers into family. And long after the king grew old, the story of the feast lived on, not just as a contest, but as a lesson, that greatness does not come from conquering others, but from cooking together, side by side, with love. Day 2. Invention. Malaika danced while she cooked, literally. She made banana leaf-wrapped goat ribs marinated in pineapple and pirapiri, with roasted groundnut crust. Nia, silent as dawn, prepared baobab sorbet on coconut flatbread, finished with golden sugar dust and hibiscus syrup. This time, the court was silent after tasting. Even the drummers paused. The king's eyes softened, and for the first time he stood up before the final gong. He did not speak, but simply walked down from his throne and placed his hand on both plates, first Malaika's, then Nia's, then looked toward the sky. The courtiers whispered. It was said that when a king speaks through silence, the ancestors are listening. The whispers turned to wonder. Outside the palace walls, children mimicked the cooks in play, wrapping leaves around pebbles and pretending to stir spice into sand. Old women sat beneath acacia trees arguing whose dish had more spirit. Traders sold wooden spoons carved with the names Malaika and Nia. Their names had become rhythm, their rivalry a river flowing through the kingdom. That night, neither woman slept. Malaika sat near the fire, staring into the flames as her mother's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her that fire could both create and destroy. Nia stood barefoot in the palace gardens, her fingers brushing the mint leaves as she listened to the wind. She remembered her grandmother's quiet strength, the way she taught that the most powerful flavors were the ones that lingered without shouting. By the morning of day 3, the palace buzzed like a beehive. It was the queen's feast. This was not just a test of skill, it was the soul on a plate. The king, wearing robes woven with threads from every region of the land, took his seat under the royal umbrella. Behind him, the elders, chiefs, and spiritual mothers of the land sat in silence, holding clay cups of cleansing tea. Malaika came forward first. Her skin glistened with oil, her feet bare, her energy volcanic. She had made cinnamon beef folded into cassava leaf rolls, surrounded by deep-fried plantain hearts, beetroot sauce thick as night, and crowned with a swirl of palm wine glaze. Her feast roared with power, full of earth and flame. Then Nia stepped forward. No fire, no rush. Her dish was wrapped in layers of steamed banana bark. When unwrapped, it revealed lentils slow-cooked in tamarind and morina broth, okra pearls on top, and a single desert flower floating in the center. It smelled like rain on dry soil, like memory, like longing. The king tasted both. He took his time. Then he rose, not as a ruler, but as a man caught between two rhythms of his land. He looked at Malaika. "You bring the fire of our warriors." He looked at Nia. "You carry the peace of our ancestors." And then, he did what no one expected. He removed the golden ring from his right hand and split it in two. He gave one half to Malaika and one half to Nia. A kingdom built on fire alone burns itself. A kingdom ruled by silence alone forgets its voice. But a kingdom that learns to cook with both will never starve. The two women looked at each other. There was no hate. There was no loss. Just respect. Malaika extended her hand. Nia took it. And the crowd erupted not in chaos, but in song. A new song, one that had never been sung before, with two names woven into its chorus. And so, Malaika and Nia ruled not as rivals, but as twin queens. One ruled the kitchens of celebration, the other the kitchens of healing. They taught children to cook both with their hands and with their hearts. And long after the king returned to the ancestors, long after the palace grew old and vines crawled up its walls, people still spoke of the feast that saved a kingdom and the two women who cooked it into legend. The crowd rose to its feet as the king's words echoed across the court, over the drum circle, beyond the high stone gates, and into the soul of the land itself. For a moment no one moved. Then the people erupted not with the wild roar of war, but with the thunder of joy. Two queens, two thrones, two flames from one fire. Malaika blinked, her breath shallow, her warrior spirit quieted. Her whole life had been a rhythm of battle, of proving, of pressing forward. Yet now, victory did not taste like conquest, it tasted like shared space. Nia stood still, eyes wet, but her smile was steady. She had not come to win. She had come to cook what was true. That truth had been seen, honored, and crowned. The king lifted both women's hands into the air and joined them together. "Let this be our new tradition," he declared. "No more shall we raise one voice and silence the other. From now on, our feasts will be made by many hands. Our stories will have many tellers. Let the flame and the rain both be sacred." That night, the palace glowed brighter than the stars. Malaika and Nia sat side by side on twin stools of ebony and gold. A long wooden table stretched across the royal courtyard, heavy with dishes from every region: okra soups from the west, millet cakes from the east, dried fish with mango relish from the islands, roasted yams from the mountains. The people ate not in silence, but in song. Not in rank, but in circles. Children danced between the tables, mimicking Malaika's fiery steps and Nia's graceful movements. The old women sang lullabies woven with recipes, while young boys carried trays like tiny servants of flavor. From above, the moon watched, full and approving. As the night deepened, the king stood again. But this time he did not speak. He poured wine into two carved wooden cups and handed one to each queen. Together they lifted the cups, tilted them, and poured the wine onto the earth. "For the ones who cooked before us," Malaika whispered. "For the ones yet to taste," Nia added. The next morning, a new kitchen was built behind the palace, a great open-air space called the Flame and the Silence. It would be a school, a sanctuary, and a meeting ground. Young chefs came from villages far and near, each bringing their own spice, their own story. Under the twin queens, they learned to honor both the roar and the hush of cooking, to flavor with courage and with care. Years passed. The kingdom changed, not through war or gold, but through meals shared across difference. Neighbors who once argued now cooked together. Markets once divided by status became mosaics of laughter, bartering, and recipe exchange. And whenever people asked how peace had come, how unity had been stirred into the bones of a kingdom, The elders would smile and say, "It began with 2 women, one who danced with fire, one who listened to rain, and a king who tasted both and chose them both. That is how the table grew long enough for us all." And somewhere, in a kitchen warmed by sun and story, a young girl stirs a pot, dreaming not of winning but of feeding a future full of queens. After the celebration died down and the flames of the queen's feast turned to gentle coals, the real challenge began. Ruling a kingdom together was not like cooking side by side for one night. It was a daily fire that tested patience, trust, and loyalty. At first, Malaika and Nia worked in harmony. They taught children, they led market reforms, they built the royal kitchen into a place where even the poor could taste royalty once a month. People called them the flame and the rain. But as seasons changed, so did the winds in the palace. One day, a foreign diplomat arrived from the northern territories. A chef in her own right, she praised Nia's gentleness, comparing it to the wisdom of ancient queens. She said, quietly but intentionally, that fire might cook food, but water shapes the land. Malaika heard. That night, Malaika stood alone in the royal kitchen, staring at her knives. She didn't say a word, but the cassava she chopped was sharper than usual. The next day, Malaika announced a grand festival of flame meats grilled on volcanic stones, spices so strong they made grown men cry. The crowd roared with delight. But Nia watched from the balcony, silent. Weeks later, Nia held her own event, the Calm Feast, where elders told stories, dishes were served with wooden spoons, and nothing was hot enough to burn. The people listened, and many wept. The king noticed the divide growing. At night, he walked the gardens alone, wondering, had he chosen unity or created a hidden war in 2 thrones? Then came the drought. The wells dried. The harvest failed. People grew thin, and stomachs grumbled across the kingdom. The king summoned his queens and said, "You were chosen not to outshine one another, but to balance the throne. Fire alone will burn us. Silence alone will starve us. What will you do now?" Malaika and Nia looked at each other not as rivals, not as performers, but as sisters in destiny. Slowly, they nodded. Together, they created a survival menu. Dishes made from drought-resistant crops, amaranth leaves, sun-dried tomatoes, fermented cassava, groundnut paste. Malaika taught people to build fire pits that saved wood. Nia taught water-saving techniques and how to cook with little flame. The court watched in awe. The people endured. And the land, moved by balance, began to reign again. In time, stories changed. The kingdom became a model across many lands. Foreign rulers sent their daughters to study under the 2 queens, not just to learn how to cook, but how to lead. And whenever a young girl doubted her voice, the elders would say, "Once upon a time, 2 queens chose each other over pride, and saved a kingdom with a pot, a flame, and a spoon."